My name is Ashley Call Williams. I am the marketing manager at Ringleader. I want to quickly give a shout out to Randy Winsman with ShoreTel Forums for supporting us and helping us out with our webinars. Also, Neil Darling with Ringleader will be the presenter today. Neil is recognized as one of the nation's top experts on ShoreTel SIP. He invented ShoreTel's first ever native SIP solution and continues to work closely with ShoreTel SIP community. So, Neil, if you're ready, you can go ahead whenever you are.
Thanks, Ash. I'm hearing myself. Let me fix that. Okay, can you hear me, Ash?
Can, yes.
Okay, good. I don't hear the echo now. Okay, good. Hi, thanks for joining today. We're expecting a huge turnout today, but we just got Kathy so far, so we'll let them pile in here. People are running a few minutes late. But we wanted to cover, we've been covering almost weekly through the pandemic. We took Christmas off, but as Ashley mentioned, we've partnered with BTX and ShoreTel Forums to do informative webinars pretty much weekly on things like SIP trunking and faxing over IP and other topics. And the topic today is really around considerations of CrowdVoice, TeamVoice, and ZoomVoice as an alternative to your next phone system. The webinar itself is about 30 minutes. We try to keep within 30. We do run over maybe a little bit for questions, but we do respect your time, and we'll actually open up for questions at the end. If you do have a question, you can just hit the QA tab on the meeting program here, and you can post your question there, and then Ashley will go through them at the end. Go ahead, Ash. So that's me, and I really the question today is: should you consider CrowdVoice, TeamVoice, or ZoomVoice for your next phone system? We're going to talk a little bit about the evolution here, where we've discussed, particularly in this community, with the ShoreTel Mitel system, and then using things like Teams or Zoom as a way to augment or complement it, particularly for meetings, for group collaboration, and things like that. But there's been some question about whether maybe as a result of the hybrid environment and the situation that we find ourselves in with working remote and gearing ourselves towards a hybrid work environment, there's been some questions of whether things like CrowdVoice, TeamVoice, and ZoomVoice could be our next phone system. So we just want to talk about that a little bit and give you some things to consider, and hopefully make you a little more educated on the topic by the time we're done in 29 minutes or so. Go ahead. A little bit about us. We're located in the DC metro area, Northern Virginia, actually Fredericksburg, Virginia. We've been here since 2003. We have POPs for our ShoreTel-based SIP trunking, both in Santa Ana, California, as well as in Equinix in Ashburn, Virginia. We've been by far the leader in ShoreTel and Mitel SIP trunking since 2007. And the reason for that is really geared around we don't require any kind of SBC, any in-gate separator. If you wanted to connect to SIP trunks with your Mitel, your on-prem Mitel or ShoreTel system, you could just call us up, and in about 90 minutes, we'll have you turned on. And the benefit of SIP trunking, in general, is that you get about 70% savings. There's a lot more utility with it than using plain old telephone service. And it's really allows the ShoreTel or Mitel administrator to have a lot more power and control of the system, as well as, like I said, that operational expense, OpEx savings on a month-to-month basis. So again, I'm going to talk about the Ringleader, our CrowdVoice or TeamVoice and our ZoomVoice offerings with you today. A little timeline just for history. So back in pre-2005, there really was no SIP trunking. Everything to the phone system was, excuse me, was POTS and PRI only. POTS means plain old telephone service with copper lines, and then PRI just refers to the ISDN, the T1 connection that you have with the phone company. Everything would plug into a T1K, for example, on the ShoreTel system. and you would be able to leverage both copper lines as well as PRI, really up till about 2007. And that's right where our timeline's a little bit, yeah, probably right. 2007 is when actually EtherSpeak, the predecessor to Ringleader, we came up with a native solution on version 7 of ShoreTel for providing SIP trunks. And as great as that was, it was very limited until what we call SIP trunking went mainstream, right around version 13 in 2000, right around 2013, where ShoreTel had implemented SIP proxy technology and things like that, so that you could actually use all the features, not just point-to-point calls, not just inbound calls to users or outbound calls from users, but calls to call groups and call center, contact center functionality all became mainstream. And it really allowed the ShoreTel system, when you weighed using a PRI or using SIP, it just took the lead at this point because you weren't limited to 23 channels. You weren't required to buy additional hardware and things like that. So we call it a SIP and PRI parity. Was achieved right around 2013. And then right at 2016, we actually changed our name. We became Ringleader from EtherSpeak. In addition, ShoreTel was acquired by Mitel. I think it was around 2017. And now there's been this trek really pushing the ShoreTel on-prem community and became the Mitel on-prem community, but there's been this push to the cloud. And then, as we all know, in the past couple of years, we've been dealing with a pandemic, and we've been dealing a lot with calling apps and other things to sort of keep our workers working, and not getting the full benefit of our on-premise phone system because very few people were on-premise because of the pandemic. So now, is this a case where the tools that we use to augment the phone system while we're remote, do they take the #1 position over and replace the ShoreTel Mitel system, or at least considerations for doing that, since we've gotten more and more comfortable with things like Teams and Zoom outside of the office? Just a little idea here of what happened. Currently, or back in 2019, before the pandemic, at least as it relates to Zoom, there were 20 million users. And again, Teams is part of Microsoft. It's part of the Office 365, network, as we call it. And it actually grew from 20 million to 145 million, really since the pandemic started. So the daily active users has grown dramatically. And then on the Zoom side, it grew also exponentially because Zoom became the de facto meeting app. And now they have 300 million daily active users. And now they have 18,000, a lot less than 20 million or 145 million, but they have 18,000 Zoom phone customers, what we call ZoomVoice, characterized as ZoomVoice. And then it's now currently the 8th most popular non-gaming app. So there's been a race with all the money that these companies have made to really build on the functionality that you find in the ShoreTel system. They're moving from meeting and collaboration apps to trying to be full-fledged phone systems. And there are some considerations with that. So let's talk to the next slide. So you may have a scenario where you already communicate with your office. You have been using Microsoft Teams or Zoom. We in fact do it here at Ringleader as well. But the question begs asking, is it also a phone system? So let's talk about what the differences are. So you can either on Teams, you could have internal calls. You can call other users. Even on Zoom, you can obviously connect to other users. But external phone calls are managed by systems like Mitel or Avaya or NEC or Cisco, things that are either a PBX or an IP PBX. And now there's obviously cloud-based systems like Packet8 and RingCentral and some of our competitors that are out there. But really now it's the question of should you have the hybrid, and what functionality should be done where, and should the balance kind of switch from a ShoreTel Mitel system where you do your phone calls, should you consider migrating that functionality to a TeamVoice or to a ZoomVoice based platform? One other thing is, say the importance of phone calls. There's a study that was done back in 2020 by New Digital Reality, and I think this is really interesting. That's why I include the slide here. But by generation, we always make fun of this, at least around here, the Gen Xers, or excuse me, the Gen Zs, and they make fun of the boomers. But this was interesting because it just shows how people prefer to communicate. And it really is tied to your generation a little bit, what your preferences are, and what was primary while you were in the prime of your career. What you're used to is really what you continue to do. But you could see with the generations that there is, less and less dependence on the phone itself. Actually, there's more and more people that are using mobile messaging, and it's really attributed by your age group that you're in, what your preferences are. So this is good, at least as you consider internally in your organization. How old are your users? How mature are they? Have they used an Octel system, a voicemail system? Have they depended on a phone system? Have they had a cassette player? I guess. But based on the age, it really drives how you want to interact, how do you want to communicate. We used to laugh especially with my kids, we talked about they got me into texting, and I was like, this is so dumb. Why am I texting? I could just call you. But then they got into group texting, and slowly we all came on board, and even the carriers were making tons of money because they charge you per text, and there was limits on the number of texts. But eventually that went away, and they rolled it into the monthly fee. But my kids had a preference, obviously, for communicating via text and not making actual voice phone calls to people. All right, so you have three types of ZoomVoice and TeamVoice, Zooms and Teams. We go phone system architecture. You have one where you have a Team Zoom without a phone system, and then you have Teams and Zoom with a phone system and a calling plan, and then you have Teams and Zoom with a phone system. At least on the Teams side, we call it direct routing. And really, what that means is that you've made the transition over from just using it as a meeting app or just using it as an app that you do some calling on, to actually having pretty much the same services, whether it's your IVR, your interactive voice response, your automated attendant, your call groups, your call flows, actually built into Teams. And most of what is that you can do on the ShoreTel MyCell system, you can actually do on Teams right now, and actually very soon on Zoom, because Zoom has made the investments to say, hey, we already have the base of users for meetings. Why don't we try to put the PBX-like functionality into the platform as well? Just really main consideration, and even with working with a company like us, because we do offer CrowdVoice TeamVoice, we offer ShoreTel MyTel native SIP trunks, as well as as TeamVoice, ZoomVoice, and CrowdVoice are three op. But there's some planning that has to be done to make sure that you do this transition. And what we suggest is that, at least for our ShoreTel MyTel community, is that they take their time. And what you do is you enable native SIP trunking on the ShoreTel MyTel system, preferably from Ringleader, because that's our company. But really, with any company that you want, if you use Ringleader, however, you don't have any in-gate separators to worry about. You can sign up with us in hour and a half, and then you also have a bundle of minutes that is assigned to the ShoreTel MyTel system. And any of the users can use that anywhere the ShoreTel is. You have that one single connection or a redundant connection, but those minutes are not exclusive to just the ShoreTel system. You can actually use those minutes with both the TeamVoice connection as well as the ZoomVoice connection. And this is great because, again, it allows you to put your toe in the water, but it also allows you to transition very gradually from a centralized IPPBX platform, that you can slowly move users from one platform to the other. You can move them from ShoreTel, MyTel, out to TeamVoice, for example, or ZoomVoice, or even CrowdVoice. You literally can move the numbers real time from one user out to another. Now, during the pandemic, we also talk a lot about, the importance of what we've learned, and have we learned anything? If something like this should happen, if another variant happens, we don't want to end up in a scenario where we're all scurrying around trying to figure out what to do with the phones. Hopefully, we've learned a lesson based on what's happened and how we exited our offices, to make sure that turns into a best practice. And we say, hey, if this happens, something like this happens again, whether it's a terrorist event or a disaster, and I hate to talk doom and gloom, but what have we learned here, and what we're doing next? Let's make sure that we're prepared to pivot should something bad happen again. So sometimes really coming up with a step-by-step plan to really give you the most flexibility. I mean, you can keep your on-prem system, but you could migrate some users and eventually maybe all your users, over to whether it's TeamVoice, CrowdVoice, or ZoomVoice. And you want to be able to do that in a very methodical way, make sure that those users are trained, they understand how to use it, and that it also matches with your maintenance contract, your other things, your other commitments that you may have on your existing phone system. You want to balance that out so you make that transition so it all coincides at the right time, so you can make a very clean break from an internal-based system to a cloud-based offering like CrowdVoice, TeamVoice, or ZoomVoice. TeamVoice features on the Microsoft side, again, there's a little bit of a life cycle here as far as what Microsoft's done, but they initially had a Microsoft Link, if people remember Link. It was kind of the first foray into a Microsoft-based phone system, and then they acquired Skype for billions of dollars. Maybe it was a couple billion. I thought it was a lot of money back then, but apparently it's really not that much. But they acquired Skype, and then didn't do really much with it. But they went from Teams, and then they called it Skype for Business, and that's where the Teams functionality got rebranded, kind of like EtherSpeak into Ringleader. It was the same thing. It was the Link, Microsoft Link, into Skype for Business. And then it evolved into Teams, and Teams was a part of the Office 365 suite. It is a license that you have to acquire. So if you have Office 365, you could enable Teams, but first thing you have to do is actually acquire the license. So you would go to your Office 365 license provider, your vendor or your VAR or whatever it may be, and you want to make sure that you have proper licensing. And one of the things you'll find out is the licenses aren't free. You have either E3 or E5 level license, and it ranges between $15 and $20 per user per month, just to pay Microsoft for the license. And then if you do that, however, you can have a full-fledged business class voice. You also have channel-based workspace, very tight integration with Office 365, file sharing, CRM integration, video and audio conferencing, voicemail, fax to email, caller ID, and call recording. Although the call recording is a little not fully baked yet, but it is absolutely in the product now. But you just have to make sure that you again consider all those options and make sure they match with what you need within your organization. ZoomVoice is brand new, so we have a ZoomVoice connector. It also provides business class phone and voice. Zoom only came out with a hard phone, an IP phone that works with ZoomVoice last summer. So they've been racing to get a phone system and the phone features necessary for ZoomVoice or Zoom Phone, they call it, for a long time. But it's just really coming on now. And it also has file sharing, video and audio conferencing, voicemail, fax to email, caller ID, and call recording. So pretty much everything you can do with the ShoreTel MyTel system is either online or shortly coming online with a ZoomVoice, but they're about a year behind where Microsoft's at right now. Lastly, we have CrowdVoice. Now, CrowdVoice is something that we developed really prior to the pandemic, but we've actually enhanced it during the pandemic because we saw the gap that happened with CrowdVoice with TeamVoice and ZoomVoice. Only in that, Zoom is the ultimate meeting app. Everybody uses it for meetings, but wasn't necessarily good for phone calls. In addition, the licensing on the Zoom side is very, very expensive. It will cost you almost $30 a month per user to have both meeting functionality as well as unlimited local and long distance. So we said, hey, why don't we provide a desktop and mobile app that is really free. You could actually download it for free at www.crowdvoice.app, but also provide what we call crowds and rings functionality. And what that means is each user can have the ability to configure an automated attendant rate from the app and configure hunt groups that have unified SMS, they have group conferencing, so you can have a conference with your hunt groups. You can do all these things. You can have multiple crowds, multiple automated attendants for each user if you wanted. Or they can become members of the crowd, and they would allow them to have very distributed, meaning you don't have to be in the same office, but you can receive phone calls from what we call a crowd center, have integrated recording, conferencing, encryption, video, video conferences, all from the desktop app as well as the mobile app itself, push notifications and encryption. And I have a golden retriever out here. And again, we have a free version that you can try for free at crowdvoice.app. And then there's the paid version. If you do pay $15 a month, you get unlimited calling to North America for each user. Each of those users can have up to 3 phone numbers, and anywhere in Mexico, US, or Canada. You have call recording on a user level. They can enable or disable it. And then voicemail to email, fax to email, all integrated in for $15 a month. And then we do have very reasonable pricing on the Crowds and Rings functionality, which is really where you get your Crowd Center piece. So we think we're offering something that's very, very competitive to what Microsoft and both teams is doing, and a way to augment what you may have with your ShoreTel users, in that if you have ShoreTel users and they don't have faxing, you could actually add a CrowdVoice account to do the faxing, to do the video meetings, and things like that from both mobile as well as desktop. So it could be Apple Mac, or it could be Windows desktop, as well as the mobile iOS or Android. All comes with it, and they are completely synced, including free meeting technology as well on sharing desktops and things like that. TeamVoice pricing, again, other than the licensing, it ranges from $12 per user per month, plus the licensing, plus the connector. So in this case, you have to pay for the connection, which is $4.50 a month, to connect you to Teams from your existing ShoreTel environment. But if you wanted to pay for unlimited calling per user, it would be $12 a month. And then they have a shared channel model, which just means that you just set up basically a group of lines that the Teams users in your organization would share, that they would have unlimited inbound and outbound calling. Anytime that a Teams user made a phone call or received a phone call, it would use one of these shared channels, and it's basically like a trunk group, or a trunk group. And so you would just say, hey, I have 100 users, I need 25 Teams lines, shared channels, and then you would pay $20 each for those call paths, and then your Teams users would share that. So that way you avoid the per user pricing, you just base it on usage pricing. What we've done is we've said to our ShoreTel users that you actually that are Ringleader SIP customers, that they have to pay is the $4.50 per month, and there's no contract on that, because you already have an existing SIP agreement. You have a bundle of minutes when you sign up for ShoreTel Mitel SIP trunking with Ringleader. So you may have anywhere from 2,500 to 100,000 minutes per month, and instead of just dedicating them to the ShoreTel, you can actually apply them both to the ShoreTel and the TeamVoice environment, or the ShoreTel and the ZoomVoice environment, Zoom phone environment. So that gives you the option of really saving a bunch of money, because you only have to pay for the $4.50 if you're an existing SIP customer with Ringleader. All right, so we do this, but wait, there's more. So yeah, if you do sign up as a result of sitting through this webinar today, we actually give you a free month. We eliminate any of the setup fees. We want you to try the faxing. We want you to try the conferencing. We want you to try CrowdVoice. We want you to try all this stuff. We also TeamVoice and ZoomVoice. If you're interested, we'll hook it up for free. And if you have users that you want to use, you have to bring your own licenses for E3 or E5 licenses on the Microsoft side, or your ZoomVoice Zoom phone license. But assuming you do that, we'll activate it for you for free. And we actually it's about $50. We give you 2,500 minutes and 5 call paths. You can use it any way that you want. We can give you a direct dial phone number on Zoom or on Teams for your users, as well as a fax number. So you can kick the tires, make sure that you're comfortable with it, and you don't even have to pay us for the SIP side, but we'll hook up your ShoreTel Mitel system as well, and then we'll show you how that all works. And hopefully, having that integration, having a partner that will allow you to make this migration slowly is a good thing, and you can get to know us a little bit during this trial period. So we do it for folks that want to sign up as a result of sitting through this 30 minutes of me chatting on here. So because we're light today here, we have a few minutes for questions. Do we have any questions?
I don't see any questions. No.
Kathy, any questions? All right. All right, everybody. Well, I appreciate your time today. Appreciate you giving us this half an hour today. We did do this, incidentally, we do this with different content almost every week. So, if you see it and you want to join next week, we'll have a different topic. What's the topic next week, Ashley?
Um, let's see the topic next week. The topic next week is on how easy it is to SIP trunk with.
Oh, okay, with the native SIP trunk. Yep. So that hopefully, if you're interested in that, you can join us again. We appreciate you spending half an hour a week with us, and hopefully you get a little knowledge out of it, and you learn to maybe want to be a customer, sign up with us, and kick the tires for free just for attending today. So thank you for your time. We appreciate it very much, and have a safe and blessed day.